We talked about the clickbait. It is lying. But what else is lying? Well, the people that perpetuate conspiracy theories, they have a couple of things going on. They may not be lying. I'm not questioning their belief. It's very hard to determine belief. You'd have to give them a very high-tech, high-accuracy polygraph exam for that. But what I am questioning is why they insist on spreading shit that they know there isn't a whole lot of support for. Because it creates panic. And there are numerous articles written by very reputable magazines and newspapers about how bad conspiracy theories are hurting us. And I'll be the first one to say you've heard it before on this show. I don't want you to stop looking. For Christ's sake, never stop peeling back the layers of reality. But when you find a wheelbarrow full of data, 200 megatons, it's a big wheelbarrow. Fucking work with me. And in another little area that outside the wheelbarrow, you find 6 ounces of anomalies. You cannot then pick up the 6 ounces and say, these don't fit, I must acquit. You got to look at them and say, well, they are anomalous. Let's see why. Let's take a look at it. But not, here's my new theory on what happened. Oh, that wheelbarrow, just put a tarp over it. I don't want to look at it. Here's my new theory, because this is exciting. Yeah. Fucking idiots that do this. Let's talk about the moon landing real quick. I love this guy. He does 5 stupid things about everything. And he's also picked on the UFO stuff, which I actually give those guys some credit. So him and I don't agree on everything, but he's intelligent, and he's got a good little thing. It's a quick clip. Let's listen to it.
Hey, here are 5 stupid things I've noticed about moon landing conspiracy theories. The Kubrick filmed the whole thing on a soundstage argument. One of the most well-known and preposterous claims of moon landing hoaxers is that the footage of the moon landings was actually shot here on Earth on a secret soundstage by none other than 2001: A Space Odyssey director and one of my favorite filmmakers, Stanley Kubrick. Now, never mind that the footage depicts astronauts doing things like floating in zero gravity in the space capsules and walking in the lighter lunar gravity once they had landed. That would have been very difficult, if not impossible, to fake on a soundstage on Earth in the 1960s. This theory also asserts that NASA hired Kubrick to direct this project in 1968 when he was still in post-production for 2001. And if you believe that he would have allowed NASA to distract him from finishing his movie, you don't know dick about Stanley Kubrick. The ignorance of hard scientific evidence. That moon footage that Kubrick supposedly faked on a soundstage, yeah, there's hundreds and hundreds of hours of that. I mean, literally miles of film and videotape, all taken by the astronauts themselves.
We're talking about critical thinking here and how conspiracy theory fits into this. Let me just add, it doesn't matter how many miles of videotape are on anything. Come on. The length of it has that, I mean, what you're trying to imply is that there's a lot of footage, and for all of that to have been faked would have been very difficult. But it's completely irrelevant, the number of miles of film there are of NASA doing anything. But it's a jump in logic, and if you're willing to make that jump, go ahead. I'm not. I'm going to stick to the facts.
Most of which was never broadcast, and only recently, in the last few years, has been made available to the public through home video releases and over the internet. And add to that all the moon rocks and regolith that the astronauts brought back to Earth from the moon, and the fact that in 2009, the landing sites were photographed by a probe in lunar orbit, and the descent stages of the lunar modules and the other equipment left behind by the astronauts at the time was clearly visible. You take all of that, and you've got several mountains of evidence that the lunar landings actually took place, that if you're a hoaxer, you just have to pretend you don't see. The number of conspirators required.
And for the record,
nearly 500,000.
Hold on. For the record, he's calling hoaxers. He didn't know what to call them because, you have like truthers for 9/11. Well, he's calling those that believe that it's a hoax hoaxers, which can be a little confusing because you might think hoax or someone committing the hoax. So he's calling about those that believe not the moon landing or a conspiracy. He's calling them the hoaxers for the purpose of this.
Worked on the Apollo project. Not just astronauts, but scientists, engineers, factory workers. And this was not a short-term project. It was 11 years from President Kennedy's "we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things" speech to the end of the final Apollo mission. none of those hundreds of thousands of people has ever come forward with compelling evidence that the moon landings were faked. Now, hey, maybe they all have just been keeping their mouths shut for 40 years. Who knows? But don't forget, it's not just the American public who they were fooling. What about the Soviets? Moon hoaxers always seem to forget about the incredibly powerful and hostile country we were competing against in the space race. I mean, sure, sometimes they'll cite the space race as motivation for faking the landings, since the US was desperate to beat the Soviets to the moon, or at least make it look that way. But don't you think if the spacecraft we said we were sending to the moon weren't actually going there, the Soviets might have noticed? Hoax proponent and all-around contemptible asshole Bart Sibrel claims that the Soviet Union didn't have the capability to track spacecraft as far as the moon until after the Apollo program was over, but that's horseshit. The Soviets launched Luna 2, the first unmanned space probe to reach the moon, in 1959, and they launched and tracked multiple unmanned spacecraft to the moon throughout the 1960s. But hey, speaking of Bart Sibrel and stupid things about moon landing conspiracies, how about the fact that Buzz Aldrin only punched Bart Sibrel once? September 9th, 2002. It's one of my favorites.
September 9th, 2002. Bart Sibrel, conspiracy theorist on the moon landings, always harassing Buzz Aldrin, showing up at any event he shows up at. Why do you lie? Why do you lie? You lied about the moon landings. How can you live with yourself? Buzz Aldrin's, what at this time, like 70 years old, he just fucking clocks him. I mean, right hook from southern Florida to Canada connects with this guy. You can hear the smack 20 feet away. And he just takes this fucking dude out. I'm sure they settled out of court, but that's not important. He got the hit in.
Because that's the day that this happened. That's moon landing hoaxer Bart Sibrel getting punched in the face, and second man on the moon Buzz Aldrin doing the punching. God, I could watch that all day. Actually, do you mind? Anyway, moon landing conspiracy theories don't just offend me for their ignorance and their irrationality. They offend me because they seek to deny what I think is really the greatest accomplishment in human history. I mean, think about it. Hundreds of thousands of individuals pooling their labor and their intellect and their courage and landing people on the moon. And not just once, but 6 times. I mean, the people that did that, the astronauts and the technicians and the engineers and the scientists and the factory workers who manufactured the components that made the spacecraft, I mean, they're the best of us. They're my heroes, really. And it takes a special kind of cynical asshole to look at what those men and women accomplished and the mountain of evidence that they did, in fact, accomplish it, and just go, meh, didn't happen. So, really, I mean, for me, an astronaut punching a moon landing hoaxer in the face is really the most beautiful thing that can happen. I mean, what beats that? Maybe an astronaut cracking a moon landing hoaxer in the skull with a moon rock? I don't know, I'll think about it. The hardest part is only picking 5. Okay.
Yeah, that's a little too violent there, buddy. Yeah, we don't need cracked skulls. Now, why you got to go all up in that area? Are we getting ghetto gangster here on our fact stuff? Let's not do that. Whatever. But he's right, and there's so much more to it. I mean, the fact that you can look through a high-powered telescope today and see the landing site, that's a little tricky. I mean, I feel sorry for the hoaxers. How you push that one off? Oh, they must have sent a satellite with little robots to make footprints. Sure, that's what it was. Here's another one you don't hear, and I just thought of it. Apollo 13. Remember that? What was it, maybe 2 years after the moon landings? Year and a half, something like that? Think about that mission. None of these hoaxers say that didn't happen. Do you realize how difficult it was for NASA and those astronauts to make it so that those astronauts returned home alive after what happened? Remember the guy stirred the cryo tank and they had the explosion and they ended up having to go into the limb to get home, which was the lunar module. Yeah, all that. Remember that? Yeah, that happened. And the hoaxers don't talk about that. That was almost 10 times the complexity. I'd say 20 times the complexity of actually landing on the moon. So a hoaxer must either just ignore that or believe that in 18 months or 24 months that we made light years of advancement in our technology. If we are able to slingshot a disabled device around the moon, bring it back at a perfect angle with equipment failing to get it to hit the Earth's atmosphere right, and bring those guys home alive. If you can do that, I guarantee you 2 years ago you could have landed on the moon. But they won't talk about that. That's not convenient for them. And let's face it, the fact that we landed on the moon can only be made more interesting if you say it didn't happen. That's the only way you top it. It's an attention thing. And that's what a lot of conspiracy theories are. That's how Alex Jones makes his fucking living. I've got a clip that I'm not going to play tonight because I have a moral issue with getting these people airtime on my show. I want to show you the ugliness, and yet it just feels cringeworthy. Don't want them talking on my show. Don't like it. Having said that, this past this little moon conspiracy deal was pretty passive compared to what Penn and Teller, Penn Jillette, and I don't know who the fuck Teller is because I've never seen the show, but I did watch this clip. They're going to go after some 9/11 conspiracy theorists. And if you do have children in the room or you're working a funky shift and you're at work, you should probably tell the children to fuck off and get out of the room and tell your boss he can fire you if he doesn't like what you're about to listen to. Because, yes, you will be hearing this. Let's get to it.
According to a recent poll, 49.3% of the people in New York believe that our leaders knew the 9/11 attacks were planned and that they intentionally failed to act. And lots of people believe we didn't even land on the moon and that JFK wasn't killed by this guy, but by this guy, or even this guy. Are 49.3% of us just fucking crazy?
People are fundamentally skeptical. People don't trust the explanations they have. My name is Jody Dean, and I'm the chair of the political science department at Hobart and William Smith Colleges. This mistrust of an official explanation motivates them to go looking further, and then they want to keep going and keep going and keep going and find out what they think could be a more convincing explanation.
Being skeptical is good, but looking at this and having your first thoughts be, this is a hoax staged by the government, well, that takes a special kind of asshole.
Nobody can convince me that our president did not hire Saudi nationals with Saudi passports to come over to this country and fly airplanes into those buildings to give him a mandate to go over and invade Iraq as he had planned.
Nobody can convince me? Bells should go off in your head when you hear those words. That's his bullshit idea of skepticism. A real skeptic demands to be convinced with evidence. We should be skeptical of the government, but we shouldn't just make shit up. We hate showing this 9/11 footage. We should never have to see this again, but it's important to nip this bullshit paranoid fantasy before it takes root in the national conscience and Oliver Stone makes a shitty movie about it. If anybody knows 9/11 conspiracies are bullshit, it's this guy. He's Dan Daly, the retired fire chief from the fire station closest to the Twin Towers. And he was there on 9/11 and lost 50 friends when the towers collapsed.
On September 11th, I was home. It was a beautiful morning, and I received a phone call from a friend of mine who said, go inside and turn on the TV. And I said, why? He said, just turn it on. So I went inside and I turned on the TV, and I saw what millions of Americans saw. So I immediately went into my car and drove to my firehouse, where I assembled a team of men, and we made our way down to ground zero. Everything was covered with a half inch of this very thick dust, and people running around covered with blood.
And before